Hello, I'm on the wine again. So, I'm just gonna, talk about emotional intelligence again, but from a different viewpoint. Basically, I was saying before it's a destructive idea in contrast with actual intelligence, which is true, but this time I'm gonna focus on its personality aspects alone. So, because it's a mixture of agreeableness, extroversion, and conscientiousness, the agreeableness factor is very prominent in it, which is basically empathy, sympathy, and emotional regulation and emotional awareness. Yeah, so those are part of the personality variable, well, not variable, complex. It's a group of variables. Can't remember what that's called, but the group of variables in agreeableness, one of them is emotional regulation. So being aware of them, and that's what a lot of them talk about if you were going to their Twitter pages, you know, like how to regulate your emotions and stuff. Talk about taking mushrooms to do it as well. But you can see, like in job interviews and things like that, or just in settings in any situation, emotional regulation is seen as something very, you know, useful to gain advantages in the system, especially for underlings, not for the business owners though. Which made me think about Stoicism and a book I read about Christianity. Basically, emotional regulation is very Stoic, isn't it? That's basically the philosophy that underpins it. But it's also indicative of a lower state of being if you think about it, because it's the serfs, the peasants, the underclass, the slaves, the animals that mustn't rise and show their anger at the upper classes or the people with power, because if they do, that's a transgression against, that's an insult, that's a disrespect, it's disrespectful to their power. So this is why it's such a key pattern of behavior to regulate and practice in society, especially in feminine society. So you're rewarding people like who just appear to have emotional regulation, because everything's perspective and appearance. It's not real at the end of the day. So basically, in this environment, people are no better than animals. They're no better than dogs. People train dogs in this way. They put tempting things on their noses and, you know, tell them not to eat it. They train them to regulate all of their emotions, and if they don't, they're punished. That's how you train a dog. And the dog's good if it's subservient to its master. So that's what the like I'm going to use emotionally intelligent. That's or agreeable. That's what agreeable people are like. They're like dogs. They're subservient. They don't show anger. They don't show any strong emotion. They try and get rid of it, be passive, and go with the flow. That's what emotional intelligence is. It's a remedy. It's a nostrum for the weak, and its corollary would be in the long grand scheme of things, because of its promoting the weaker people into positions of, fortune, is going to be the pacification and domestication of humans, of people. This is why you could say white people are more domesticated, because we've had these systems in place much longer where you had to regulate and be passive and stoic. This is why the people coming in to conquer us are dominating us, because they're not so-called emotionally intelligent. They're not domesticated as we are. Yeah, so that's what it is. Like the Stoics invented their philosophy in response to autocracy to stop themselves from being imprisoned and murdered or whatever happened back then. It was a defense mechanism because they had tyrants in control after democracy. Or I don't know. Don't quote me on this. It's just off the top of my head. So again, like, we're seeing all this proselytization of EI in times of autocracy disguised in a skirt, basically. So it's like a similar environment to back then. We're living in autocratic, tyrannical times. Yeah, so basically, it doesn't even make sense either. Like, you know, like as a concept, as a construct, you know, it doesn't make sense. Like, how can you measure? Like, it's immeasurable. Like filling out a form and saying, I respond in such a way to this situation, or I generally do this in such a situation, is not pointing to any actual concrete thing. Because if you think about when you snap, lose your control, when is it? Like, it's usually after a long day, no sleep or something like that, in a stressful situation. Those are the times you go maybe looking for conflict, if you do. Especially if you have high testosterone. But these are not similar for everybody. One person's snapping is not the same as another person's snapping. One person's lack of control and anger is not the same as another person's controlling anger, or lack of thereof. Because I want to use an analogy here. Like, it's like this agreeable concept, the agreeableness of emotional regulation is, imagine if you were doing press-ups, right? You were in the press-up position, right? And that was your, impulse control. And you can hold that position for ages, yeah? And when your arms collapse, that's the synonym of you losing your patience, right? But it's not the same for everybody, because some people are heavier, some people have longer arms, yeah? So if you're higher testosterone, right, that's like, and the other person is very deficient in testosterone, well, the person who's got high testosterone is like doing a press up with 100 kilos on his back. He's holding his position, arms in straight position, with 100 kilos on his back because of his testosterone, right? Whereas the person with very low testosterone is holding the press up position like on the moon. That's the difference. So their regulations are not pointing to the same thing. It's not indicative of the same factor. So the fact that this is true just proves psychology and personality theory just proves that it's absolute nonsense. Personality theory is nonsense. So this is why the construct EI doesn't exist. Because there's so many variables and factors coming into play about whether someone can regulate their emotions or not. And I've already mentioned one, stoicism. You have to believe in it. If you don't believe in it, well then the whole thing doesn't come into process at all. You should just say as you think all the time. If you're devoted to the truth, then there's no such thing as emotional regulation. You just say it as it is. And it's masculine to say it as it is. So if you have brainwashed everybody to be stoic in certain situations, then you're rewarding the weak. You're rewarding the low testosterone. Yeah. And again, over time, domesticating your people, making them conquerable by foreign invaders. Like, you could be also, like, your height, biometric factors, how attractive you are and stuff like that are going to affect your so-called regulation. If you're tall and attractive, or woman, beautiful, like, figure, the opposite, attractive variables, well then that's like being in the press-up position, but not only being on the moon, but having your knees, instead of resting on your feet, resting on your knees or resting on your hips. So there's no weight at all. So there's no real emotional regulations at all. And if you imagine things that drive you to lose your patience, like injustice, lack of fairness, insults, attacks on character, if you imagine those little pieces of information or the weights being stacked on your back, leading your arms to snap, well, If you're on your knees or on your hips on the moon, right, then you can handle a lot more weight on your back. You know, so a person, let's say the muscles of the arms and chest are what this is in the mind. The muscles of the arms and chest are regulating the impulse control to stop you from snapping. Well, you could be really good at that. You could have like chest like Arnold Schwarzenegger, arms like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the endurance of you know, what do you call them, ski athletes with the 100 VO2 max. You could be like that, right? So you're extremely high in emotional regulation, but you could be very ugly, very low social status. You could be a dwarf, you know. So that's like lengthening your legs. That's like putting you on Mars, right? It's reversing. So you're high in emotional regulation, but you've also these other factors. So the weights are already on your back before you begin. So you've been dealt a physiologically bad hand. You've been dealt a physically bad hand. You've been dealt an aesthetically bad hand, but a mental pack of aces, or whatever. I can't speak. Right. So there's a conflict here. There's the bad hand physiologically, physically, and aesthetically fighting against the mental strength, which means that even though you're extremely high in emotional regulation, to the outsider, it appears that you're not. Which means that in a questionnaire, you've got low agreeableness, one factor of agreeableness. You've got low, like one portion of the agreeableness, like one ability factor, right? Which will discount your total score in the agreeableness questions. But in real mental processes, you're actually high in it. So the questionnaire is not actually showing what you actually are. It's actually measuring the fact that you have been dealt a bad hand in certain ways and you're in a bad position, you know. So yeah, that's the point. The whole concept of emotional intelligence is absolute nonsense. Agreeableness, personality theory, it's absolutely nonsense. And the promotion of emotional intelligence and the worshipping of it is domesticating people and punishing high testosterone men. Especially if you're high testosterone, high IQ in this system, you know, truth telling, you are being screwed by this dysgenic theory. That's the way it is, you know. And it's going to be the white people are going to be domesticated even more so. So there we go.